Hello and welcome to my video covering day 2 of the World Cup in Qatar. Today we had 3 games, 2 of which I'm going to talk about, one of which I didn't get to see a jot of apart from the... Did I even see a goal? I don't think I even saw any of the goals. I was out busy working today, unfortunately. So today we had Iran against England and Wales against the USA. We also had Netherlands against Senegal from Group A. Before I carry on, Netherlands against Senegal, Netherlands winning that game 2-0, as I think a lot of people expected, especially without Mane, but it was quite a tight game until Netherlands scored twice at the end. Cody Gakpo with a goal, which is sure to get a lot of people excited, especially Arsenal and United fans who would love to see them at their club. I personally wouldn't mind. I don't feel like I've seen enough of Gakpo, and to be honest, even in the game that PSV beat us in, he didn't look massively impressive, so I don't yet know what the fuss is all about. And I think there are better players that Arsenal could get. Anyway, moving on to England against Iran, which we'll talk about first. We'll get to Wales, USA later. So it was surprising at the start that we didn't have a Foden. No Foden in the first 11, but they decided to play Mount in that central midfield round. Now, I think of all games, if we were ever going to see Foden in one of those midfield 3, it was going to be today, and apparently that wasn't going to happen, which is a shame. I quite like the idea of having Foden as a 9, not a 9, as a 10 behind Kane, and then giving the ball to Saka and Sterling on the wings, and that kind of works. I was surprised to see Sterling play, especially given his form this season has not been that great. As it turns out, he actually played pretty well, but I was not a fan of that particular selection. Again, I would have been in favour of Foden coming on for him rather than, or rather starting instead of Sterling, or starting instead of Mount. Not Saka, because Saka for England has been so consistently good. I don't remember a game that Saka's played that for England that has been just bad all the way through. I don't know if he played any of the Hungary games. But even then, I could understand a little bit if he didn't play that well at that time, because I remember that being the end of the season and he's just been absolutely shot. Really not ready to play any more football at that point. And then Bellingham is 19 years old. He's 19. Makes me feel so old that someone who was watching World Cups back in 2010 it was like 10 or something. That's not right. That's not good maths, is it? It's like 7 or something like that. He was talking about his World Cups from all the World Cups that he's watched in like 2010, 2014, 2018, and how that now he's actually in a position where he's playing. Yeah, it's amazing. And he is a really, really good player. I think England will be very well served keeping him in the team as much as they can. I think him and Rice work quite well as a partnership. I don't think either of them quite make that level in terms of the holding midfield player that you would need to play the Guardiola system. So playing them together kind of makes up for that a little bit because they can rotate. But he was just excellent today. Scored the goal. Was very much everywhere in a very classic kind of Borussia Dortmund style. And yeah, it was just a really, really impressive. And he's 19. I think there's so much good to come from this kid in the next 10 years. I think for England, he's going to be amazing. And it'll be interesting to see what else happens around them. I'm guessing Saka and Foden, and they'll need to find another striker, but it's a very good team looking forward for England in the next kind of 10 years or so. Okay, and then I think one little thing off the side of, I don't know if we're talking about this later, but there was delays to the England fans getting in, which isn't good. We heard about this before the Champions League final last season? Last season's Champions League final, and the issues in Paris where fans were kind of clogged. It wasn't quite that bad, but I don't like it when I hear things like that and fans not being treated particularly well. by basically a fault in the ticketing system. I think that shouldn't be happening at this stage, to be honest. So onto the game. First goal, Bellingham, absolutely brilliant. Great cross from Shaw. He's got that down to a T, that little clip cross into the middle of the box, and Bellingham with a great header. Weird that Kane didn't really have that many chances in this game, despite how well England played. If you remember the game we scored 6 in the last World Cup, I think he got a hat-trick. So yeah, that's strange. Second goal, Saka with a fantastic finish again. Maguire setting it up as well. I'll talk about Maguire in a second. He was absolutely brilliant. But Saka with the kind of half volley finish with his left foot. And we're seeing this a bit more from Saka now, especially for Arsenal and for England. He's able to kind of take the ball on the half step and just strike it. And that's not so. I remember thinking his finishing hasn't really been that great last season for Arsenal, but this season he knows how to finish now. And I think he's learnt that from so having Jesus in the club. I think has really helped. So that was a good goal. And then Sterling with a fairly easy goal, I think, after 2-0. Because, I mean, I've skipped over the first 25 minutes where basically nothing happened because the goalkeeper had a head injury and didn't go off and then did go off. And it was extremely stop-start. And it was looking like a game which could have been very, very stop-start and very frustrating for England. And if Iran had kept that going, who knows where we would have been at half-time at least. It would have been a much worse position. But by the time we got 1-0 and then 2-0, the rest of the goals that happened just seemed to be a lot of Iran's desperation working itself out, and that team not being able to do what they wanted to do, which was frustrate England. So the third goal was actually a really nice bit of play from Kane, playing the ball into the box, and Sterling finishing first time. And he does seem a lot better. I think they mentioned this on the TV. He seems way better, operating off of a instinct rather than having to think about what he's doing. And I think that'll serve him really well as a bit of confidence for the next few games. Because as I say, he's not been in good form for Chelsea. I think it would have been difficult to adjust playing at Chelsea compared to playing at City. I think we'll see with Sterling. I'd be surprised if he's playing every game, but he does seem to be a favourite of Southgate's. So there you go. And Kane again with an assist, showing that he's definitely more than just a box poacher. He's way more than that. Annoyingly, as an Arsenal fan, he has to take a bit of credit for today's performance. I think he has to take a little bit of credit. And then Saka's goal in the second half. Once we got to half time, it definitely felt like the game was over. 3-0. England could probably take a few players off. They did hold back from that a little bit. They didn't just go like, right, half time, 5 subs, off you go. But I do think we could have probably done that, and it wouldn't have made a massive amount of difference. Scoreline still would have been as crazy as it ended up being. But Saka's second goal was a thing of absolute beauty. You could tell the minute that England, and this is a theme I think of the game, is that as soon as England managed to hit Iran on the break, on that transition with the ball, Iran could not deal with it. England had Sterling on the left, Saka on the right, Kane operating with like cute little one touches in the middle, and then also Bellingham and Mount arriving in the middle as well. Saka found himself in a position on the right hand side, jinked inside, then jinked inside, faked to shoot again, and then curled it into the bottom corner with an edge of a deflection. I think it was just a brilliant, brilliant goal. And as an Arsenal fan, I felt so proud for him. Given how badly the last England game at a major tournament went for him, I think he's shown some serious, serious class and serious personality to get on the score sheet twice today, and showing the fans he's more than just a missed penalty player. And he could, if England do go on to win the World Cup, it would be really surprising to me if Saka wasn't a serious contributor to that. I think this season he could potentially win the league with Arsenal. I think there's a good chance he could end up winning a trophy with Arsenal this season. And if he wins the World Cup, I would start worrying about Saka staying at Arsenal. I think it was kind of a strange thing to say. We've been talking about him signing a contract for ages. for about almost a year now, I think. And if he ends up winning the World Cup, does he stay at Arsenal? I really hope he does. But it does put that kind of, it puts him in such a high position in the game. You're like, well, what? Most of the time when a player at Arsenal reaches that kind of level, they leave. So we'll see about that one, I suppose. But for now, he did really, really well today. So one thing I think, there were the other two goals, which was both breakaway goals, Rashford and Grealish. And I'm not really talking too much about them because, to be honest, by that point, the game was done. The game was absolutely done. Good finishes, and Rashford took his really well. Grealish had an open net, but that was also quite a good play from Wilson, actually playing off the back of the last defender, which is the kind of thing that we've not had at England since Michael Owen. England hasn't had a player like that who's willing to work and run in behind and catch teams playing the offside trap since Michael Owen. I don't think there's been a player like that since then. So that's, apart from it, unless you count Sterling, I suppose you could count Sterling. But Callum Wilson's he is still lightning quick, even though he's fairly old now. And that unlocked the game, unlocked the goal for Grealish to score. So I just want to talk a bit about how England's playing out of the press to start with. And I think this is going to be an interesting thing to look out for in the next few games. England couldn't really play out of the press of Iran when they were pressed in the first half. I think they really struggled with that, and that contributed a bit to this kind of stop-start gameplay. But when England did get through, obviously, they were a lot more threatening once they broke through the thirds and they were at the defensive line of Iran. I do think that if England are up against a better team, probably, I don't think Wales will do it. The US might do it. The US might have a go and try and press us high. If they do, it'll be really interesting to see if we can hold the ball well enough to control the game like we did against Iran today. I do think if the US press, you think about players like Maguire, Stones, Trippier, and Shaw, none of them really strike me as press resistant at all. They're happy to pass the ball backwards, but what will probably happen is they'll pass the ball backwards and then Pickford will hit it long. So it might not be an issue in this group. I would expect that not to be an issue because I still would back Kane to be winning a lot of headers against some of those defenders. But I would also think that if those two teams reduce it to a really physical game, it might be quite difficult for England to exert the kind of authority over the game that they did today. Having said that, against teams like we watched the Netherlands today, I would expect them to press high against us, definitely, if we play them, of course. I think Ecuador probably won't. But then you're looking at teams like Brazil, France, Argentina. Would they press us inside their own half? I think there's a good chance that they would. And that might mean we'd have to find another way of playing. It might be very much like the England-Germany game at the Euros last year, actually, which was a really, really good game, but decided by the fact that Germany couldn't deal with us on the transition between them having the ball and then us having the ball. As soon as we got the ball off Germany, we were in, and I think we scored both of our goals off of transitional moments like that. So if that's how it's going to go against the bigger teams, I think I'd probably back us to do quite well. It probably just depends on how aggressive we want to be. Today, I think we were easy. It was easy to play. I don't think it'll be this easy again in this World Cup. I think it'll be much more difficult. So there's a couple of things I think there's probably kind of side issues that are probably worth talking about. Firstly, the attendance was 45,000 in this game. The capacity is 65. It's a World Cup. England are playing. And again, they're probably going to score goals in. How have they not filled the stadium? That makes that's crazy to me. I don't know the stats, but I would assume most games that England have played at previous tournaments have all been sold out. Why have they not sold this game out? It's absolutely crazy to me. There are some obvious answers. A lot of the political issues surrounding the World Cup, a lot of unrest surrounding the kind of, I suppose, the ethical ethical thought process behind going to the World Cup. Do people feel like they're able to go, or do people feel shut out because of this, that, or the other? That might be a reason, but still, it's very, very surprising to me. It's very surprising. Another thing on the attendance and on the fans, when I watched Qatar and Ecuador yesterday, there was a tiny section of Qatar fans, and they looked very orchestrated to me. It looked like it was like a very clear box, and it didn't really look like actual fans. It more looked like people who are being paid to do that kind of thing. And again, it's not going to be throwing in accusations out there, but that's what it looked like. I think the same wasn't necessarily true for England and Iran fans, but I would say that there just seems to be a lack of atmosphere at a lot of the games that I've seen so far. I've just finished watching the USA Wales game, and it didn't feel kind of alive until Wales scored towards the end. Really, it felt quite dead. And the same, I think, for the England game, albeit, yes, the game was over at half-time. I don't think many people were expecting an Iranian comeback. So, but still, it's a World Cup. I think back to South Africa, the Vuvuzelas created an atmosphere. As much as people probably hated it, it did create an atmosphere. And then Brazil, they had the samba going on all the time, even in games that they weren't playing in. It was an amazing watch. The culture kind of shone through. Russia still had an atmosphere. There is a real kind of football following in Russia, despite the fact that their team weren't necessarily at least thought to be competitive at the time. They actually ended up being quite competitive. So there's a consistency there in terms of the culture of football shining into the games that are playing, but there's nothing like that here. There's nothing like that in Qatar at the moment. Maybe it'll take time to grow. Maybe by the time we get the Argentinas, the Brazils, France, Germany all playing, that might make a difference. But at the moment, it feels quite dead. It actually feels like COVID football, and it's a bit of an indictment of the atmosphere. The penalty at the end of the game. Goodness me, where do we start with this? So, if I remember right, because this has been a while ago since I watched this, what happened now? So John Stones pulls the shirt of an Iranian player in the box. So this is 96th, 97th minute into the game. So we're like well into the long injury time that we had. And there is when they're told when the referee is told to go and look at the VAR, yes, there is evidence of a shirt pull, but it's nothing like the Harry Maguire shirt pull / body wrestling that was going on in the first half. So one wonders how they gave a penalty to Iran for that challenge, but they didn't give one to England at the beginning of the game. Does it matter? No, we were winning 6-1. We ended up winning 6-2. I don't think it makes a massive difference. But it is concerning that there's a few times, that's twice now, because I believe the Ecuador disallowed goal, which may well have been offside. I still hold to the fact that they didn't really do it properly. May well have been offside. But that decision and the decision today does seem to be favouring some underdogs a bit too much. I do think they need to be careful not to over-egg that pudding too much and make sure they use VAR for the clear and obvious. Don't start using it for things that are subjective. I do not like that. And even if England were to get a penalty later in the tournament that was subjective, I might be happy that England have scored, but why kind of change the game for that decision when there's not the evidence to support it? And I think for that kind of thing, they've got to be very careful. Just set a precedent, stick to it. I think I quite like the way that VAR was used at Russia in the Russian World Cup. I don't like the way it's being used this time. I don't know why. I don't know what the difference is. It might just be a lack of consistency, I think. Right. USA Wales. Now, I only got to watch the last 15 minutes of this because I was busy working. But it's got to be said that firstly the penalty. Don't think I've seen the US goal yet, but the penalty was a stupid challenge. The penalty, Tim Ream comes in the back of Gareth Bale and for some reason thinks he can win the ball and not foul Bale, where Bale was always going to go down in that Bale was always going to go down in that scenario. So why have they done that? Why did Tim Ream do that? I don't know. But it does it says quite a lot about both teams, I think. Firstly, that Wales will just fight for everything. They're an extremely passionate team with a little bit of quality, but not so much that anyone, I think, outside of not so much that England should be worried about them. I think other teams, Iran, I think, should be thinking they could get a result against this Wales team because they don't look that great, really. Having said that, the US don't look great, but for a different reason. I think they're attacking wise and technically, they're actually quite good. And I think they're better than their tactics and the way that they play suggests. If they had someone in the midfield who could control the ball and dictate the play, I think they'd be a much better team because they would be able to dominate a team like Wales, like apparently they did in the first half. So, but unfortunately, towards the end of the game, they just seemed to resort to lumping it into the box in the air, which made no sense because they don't have a tall striker in that team. I think that at one point Christian Pulisic was trying to win a header which in the box, which was never ever going to happen. He wasn't going to win a header in that situation. So why they don't try and do a similar thing that England are doing with wingers coming inside, trying to control the play, push your wing backs forward. You got DeAndre Yedlin on the right hand side who did actually provide a couple of good crosses today. I think they're missing quite a lot there. And against England, I'm expecting actually a really good game between those two teams because if England are going to play anything like they did against Iran, I think it's going to be quite an open game. Or maybe not an open game, but one that the US can definitely interact with because England will allow them chances to counter-attack. I don't think they'll care because I think they will feel like they can probably control that quite well. Wales obviously didn't because I think they got involved and fouled and sat back at every opportunity they could, especially after they got back to 1-1. So Brennan Johnson looks like the best threat for Wales. Given that Bale and Ramsey are on the pitch, that's a surprising thing to say, but actually these days I think the pace, and given especially how the game went towards the end of that game where it's so back and forth, are we now thinking that Brennan Johnson's going to be the best attacking threat for Wales? Yes, I think he probably is. Bale seems like a shadow of his former self. I do not think there's almost an argument to say he shouldn't really be in this team, but that's obviously sacrilege, and I'm expecting everyone to kind of crucify me for that. But apart from the penalty today, I don't think he did anything. People were talking about him not having touches in the box and that kind of thing, and he's not that kind of striker that will just stand up front and do nothing. He's never really been that, and I don't think he really serves himself any purpose at all in doing that now. So I do think he's just in the team for his leadership skills, and that's more or less it. Aaron Ramsey again doing okay, but I mean, it would if a moment's going to come for him, it'll be out of the blue. It won't be something that's consistent. I think the strength of Wales is really just how organised they are, and that's probably won't be enough against England. And I think the Iranian game is going to be really, really nervous for them. If they don't win that game, they stand a very good chance of going out. Because I would back the US to beat Iran. I think they will. I don't know about Wales beating Iran. I think that's a bit more up in the air. One more thing to say about US and Wales. Neither team are able to control the game. And again, this is something that England showed really well against Iran. They controlled the game in the most part until the game was completely finished, and I think they just kind of stepped off it a bit in the second half. Neither team showed they could control the game. The US were giving the ball away so often under comfortable possession, and Wales were maybe being forced into lumping it long because of the way that US were playing, but still they didn't show any form of control either. And I do think that's a problem going forward if Wales want to progress. One of the best things about that Wales run in 2016 at the Euros was when they were playing, they did control games. Even against Belgium, when they won that game, they controlled it. It wasn't like they were being dominated. They sat in a deep line, but Belgium had a really tough time trying to play their way through that back line. I don't get that impression from Wales at the moment. They don't look solid at all. There were plenty of opportunities where if Christian Pulisic finds himself in the right place with the ball on his right foot, he could take a shot. For some reason, that didn't happen today. I don't know. But that, again, I think that's more down to the tactics and the way that the US team set up than the way that the quality of Wales defending, I don't think, was necessarily up there with the best. So, yeah, we'll look forward to those next games then. I think they're all happening on Friday. So Friday evening, England, USA. Friday morning, I think, is around Wales. It's going to be an interesting second match day for that group. I'm expecting an England win, obviously, and I think around Wales will probably be a draw. And that will leave Wales needing to beat England in the final game to go through, to have a chance of going through. Let alone actually go through, because they couldn't overtake England if England were to win. And I think, is that right? If those are the results, then England would have qualified as group winners after 2 games, which is a position I don't think England have ever been in before in the World Cup, at least in its current format. That's really interesting. I never thought about that. So if England beat the US and Wales draw against Iran, then England will be on top with 6 points, and then there'll be 2 teams on 2 points and 1 team on 1 point. Thereby, they will have won the group. Really interesting. I mean, I'd be surprised if that happens now that I think about it. But yeah, it would be a great setup, I think, for the final game against Wales. To have nothing riding on it for England, I think, would be brilliant. Just kind of free them. They can play a second team and it would not make a difference. Apart from maybe betting players into the system. That might be the only thing that might make a difference there. I do seem to remember we went through quite well in 2010 before Bloemfontein happened, and then we lost against Germany. And I believe that might have been a problem. I can't remember if that's how it worked. I don't think we went through that comfortably, actually. I do think it was the last day that we went through on that game. One more thing I want to cover before we finish today. Ronaldo had some quotes today which reminded me of Mourinho, actually. So I'll just read them out for you. I don't have to think about what other people think. I speak when I want. The players know me really well for many years and know the type of person I am. It's an ambitious group and that is hungry and focused. I'm sure the interview won't shake the changing room's concentration and focus. I do think this is very much like Wolf Howling at the Moon by Ronaldo here. I don't, honestly, you can say what you want, but what you've done and what he's done, at the timing of what he's done, has put all the focus on him. Now, if the rest of the team are mentally strong enough to be able to deal with that, fine, cool, all right, no problem. But I doubt that. I don't think any team is really capable of that, especially a personality as big as Ronaldo. So, honestly, I think he's sounding very much like Mourinho in his kind of blame culture, which he often has at every club he works at. And Ronaldo seems to have this kind of Portuguese trait of, it's all fine, we're going to do really well, and everyone's against me. And it did feel, and there's other quotes in there as well, but it basically all felt like he was being attacked. And I do think a lot of it is brought on by himself in this situation. He's the one who walked out of Old Trafford when they were winning 3-0 against Spurs. He was, no, 2-0, sorry. And he was the one who decided to do the interview when he did. He was the one who wanted to leave and kicked up a fuss, and then it turns out he couldn't leave. And he also was offered a way out and didn't take it. There's just all of these things. I think he could have made this situation on himself a lot better. and he just hasn't. He's made it probably as difficult as it could have gotten at this point, and it'll be interesting to see what Portugal do, because they do have the kind of image of a team who could blow up, much like Man United have in the past, at least internally, with Ronaldo and the people in the dressing room that do not want him there. I think it's going to be an interesting World Cup for Portugal. But that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me natter about the World Cup. I apologise for the zooming. I have a feeling the zooming might be wrong. If not, I'm going to be cutting this bit out. But yeah, thank you very much for staying to the end. And if you want to see more of this, then subscribe. And if you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button. But yeah, tomorrow we've got a lot of games. I'm going to check actually before we carry on. So tomorrow's games then, we have Argentina against Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia coming to Qatar and playing in a World Cup. Could they do better than... they could actually. They probably could do better than Qatar. And then we've got Denmark against Tunisia. Then it's Mexico against Poland and France against Australia. I'm keeping an eye out on Argentina and France in this, on tomorrow's games. I think I might be able to watch all 4 of them actually, which would be nice. But then we're getting into the crunch period now of the World Cup, where we've got 4 games a day. And it's going to be really interesting to see how these teams start. Australia are a tough team to play against. And France won't find it easy. Well, I'll probably eat my words now, but based on the last few World Cups that Australia have been in, they won't find it easy, France, to beat this Australian team. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that. Argentina should beat Saudi Arabia fairly easily, I would expect. And they do have this pressure of being amongst the favourites to win this. Let's see how they do. But that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.